So the more that you focus on exit, the more valuable and profitable business you've got. And the more you can delegate to employees, I can guarantee you, the less stress you've got, the more time you've got in your business, and the better the outcomes are going to be in the business.
Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, chartered accountant and certified business advisor. Now, I'm excited today because I have a man on the microphone who has been very influential for small and medium business owners, not just in Australia, but worldwide. And we're going to unpack a bit of why he's so influential, but also focus on one of these pet topics of his, which is actually exit planning, which seems a bit weird because we've been talking a lot about starting a business and getting started on the right page and getting everything in place to run a really high performing business. But why would you want to be talking about exit when you're just starting your business? Now, that's a very good question. And the best person that I know to answer that question is Peter Hickey. Peter Hickey, welcome to the microphone.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Now, Peter, your current role is as president of the Institute of Advisors, which is not just an Australian organisation, but international. And we'll talk a bit about how you got to that role or your current role when we unpack this topic of exit planning. But you're also the founder of Mouse Business Systems, which has been around and a staple for a lot of small, medium business owners using the products and tools to help run their business more efficiently. And one of my highlights is you are, I guess, the author of the definitive book on business planning that every small business owner should read, which sort of summarize so well how to go about doing a business plan and what needs to go in it and the benefits of it. So, Peter, how did you get started advising small business? I guess that's the first thing. Why small business, small, medium business owners?
Yeah, it's a good question. It started off at a division of a multinational company. And we were, it was about a $5 million division. I was in charge of that division. And I just saw it go from a great business that was selling around the world to a business that just self-destructed. And it self-destructed because we were selling, of all things, squash balls around the world. And they forgot to write down the formula and everything else on a sheet of paper. So when the production manager had a heart attack and passed away, they forgot how to make a squash ball. So when you have a 90% reject rate of the world's best squash ball, and 2 years before, Paul, we'd taken Dunlop, who was a massive market leader around the world, from a 90% market share, and we'd smashed into them and taken them down to about a 10-15% market share because we were the first ones to produce a non-marking black squash ball. So basically, sitting in a company, watching it almost go into this catastrophic breakdown, looking at the dishonesty, the lack of integrity, the way some of the employees hated to be there. And it was just a disaster. And I ended up just walking away and thinking, jeepers, we can do things better than this, and small to medium sized business can do better than that. So that's where I started off as a consultant, and then started to talk to small to medium sized businesses about their strategic plan, their business plan, and what they were doing. And back in those days, there was a disconnect between a business plan and marketing and a business plan and vision. And it was sort of like a set of financial documents. So we formed this, if you like, this template that we went around and consulted with small to medium-sized businesses, and it was phenomenally successful. We got on a government program. We did a deal with the largest bank in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank, and we did these seminars and workshops around Australia, and there was just this fantastic take-up of the concept. But back in those days, we sort of thought, well, how do we automate this, and how do we make it better? So the first thing we did was we created a business plan that was full of examples because, when you're at university and school and they give you all this theoretical stuff and then they tell you to do it and you've got no idea how. Well, I was one of those dumb people that had no idea how, but if you gave me an example, I could see how to do it and I could follow the example. And that's what we did with the business planning concept. Created samples that were just very unique and very detailed, and gave it like a template. and gave it to people so they could focus more on thinking about their strategy than actually writing the plan. And then we automated it and developed, back in the DOS days and the Windows days, the first Windows based business planning software in the world. And then producing about 60,000 of our systems and selling it around the world. So it was sort of like an interesting journey that started, but it was more the feedback, Paul. It was like we felt good about what we were doing because there was a great need. The outcomes for people that had our tools and our books and our literature or came to our workshops was like this: wow, I feel like I'm in control. I'm a business owner. And then we just, scaled it not only in Australia but around the world. And it was a wonderful journey to be on.
And I guess that's all come out of an observation of what happened in a business when things weren't documented, when there wasn't a plan, and you had the situation of something happening to a key person, which meant so much knowledge went with that person, so much knowledge about how the business ran, key information, and then the business didn't have the systems and processes in place to continue profitably. And that's fairly consistent with the way a lot of small and medium businesses are run. You've got so much knowledge in the head of the key person. And look, I've been working with a number of business owners recently, and one of the key things is that everything about my business is in my head. There's nothing documented. There are no systems and processes. So I think that's a key thing, and you've put in place that system, which I know a lot of people worldwide have jumped at.
Yeah, and I think it starts from, you imagine that business owner. They're starting a business by themselves. Of course, it's in their head because they know everything. They know their vision, they know what they want to do, and they want to know how they do it. Then they get their first employee and their second employee, and it's still in their head, but they're sort of telling them what to do. So it's more of an educating them on to follow, and it's very verbal, and their communication's good. But when you start to build from there and you get to 5 to 8 to 10 and plus, you can't rely on that, and you need to write things down. And not only do you need to write things down, but if you're going to recruit somebody, you need to have some sort of control and metrics over it. As the business gets bigger and more complex, you really need to look after different areas. And you just said I think the business owner has the vision at the very beginning. The vision, that's got to translate itself to a really good business model. And that business model has to be well thought out, has to be a profitable model. But then you have to recruit people. And those people need to have a clear objective of what's going on. They need to be positive, they need to be motivated, and they need to make sure that, that what they're doing is making a difference. And I think that's key. But you can't have a good vision, a good strategy, and motivated employees if they're inefficiently working and there are no systems and processes in place. So we need to make sure that whatever we do in there is going to be in place, it's going to be efficient, and then from there, you need to make sure that your customers are happy and you've got the right marketing metrics, and it goes on and on and on. But it's the fundamental part of, if you write it on a sheet of paper and then you start breaking it down, and then each person in the organization sees their piece, and then they can remain accountability. And if you think about the number one reason for failure in business owners around the world, is lack of strategy execution. It's a lack of follow up. Most business owners will say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that at the beginning of a year. And they get all excited. They're on their holiday and they're doing their plan and thinking it out, and they get excited about the year. And if you look at the end of a year, Paul, they've done very little. They might have, implemented 20 to 30% of what they said they would. And it's because they haven't written it down, they haven't remained accountability. And you and I see as advisors, when we talk about, I call it's a gift, the gift of accountability. But you've got to have that good plan, but you can't put it in the drawer. If it sits in the drawer, and most business owners do, or they just, the bank asks for a plan, so they do a plan for a bank, which is a different plan to growing the business. To me, the most important part of that strategy is the output. It's not the 60 pages or the 20 pages or the 30 pages of the strategy and the competitive analysis and all the rest. It's the action plan at the end. That's the outcome. And then that's not an outcome unless you're following that up on a monthly basis. And, I think the first thing that, we do as advisors is, to simply ask a business owner, what were your successes last month? What were your obstacles and what are you going to do next month? So getting business owners to report on what they did month by month, and then to think about what they're going to do over the next month. And, but rather thinking of that next month as a short-term goal, it's thinking of it as a broader, 12 months, 24 months sort of picture.
That's a lot of. Some people might look at that and say that's a lot of work, a lot of things to be concentrating on, or what's the value to it? Now, one of the obvious things is you've got a business that runs more efficiently and more profitably. But if you're doing all of these things, why do you need to think about exit plans or exiting your business? Why is that essential?
So coming back to exit planning, yeah. So I built a business. And as I was traveling along that business, when I started a business, I started to grow it. I thought that you made your money out of the profit each year that you pay yourself. I didn't realize that you were building an asset, and this asset is building in value, and that at some stage in the future you could sell that. But when you think about that as an asset and you think about you building that value, and then when you sell your business, I made more money out of selling the business than I ever did out of working in it, and growing it. So it was just a phenomenal outcome, number one. So I was sold on it from that perspective. But if you look at, every business owner should be thinking about it. They should be thinking, and there's a really good reason. Who's going to buy your business in 5 years' time or 7 years' time? If you start thinking about who's going to buy it in 7 years' time, then you start to think of a different model. If you think about what makes an attractive, valuable business, non-reliance on a business owner is one of the key factors. So what can you put in place to help you not to become reliant on a business owner? Now, the key factors that mean that you have a valuable business also mean that you've got a good business. So the more that you focus on exit, the more valuable and profitable business you've got. And the more you focus on, having the business owner not being reliant, as a key part of that business, the more you can delegate to employees, I can guarantee you, the less stress you've got, the more time you've got in your business, and the better the outcomes are going to be in the business. So there's a really good reason from a business perspective. Just good governance, good running a business. The more attractive, the better the business, and the better off you are going to be mentally and from a stress perspective. But there's another really good reason. If you look at our marketplace at the moment, 50% of all business owners are over the age of 50. Now, 50% are over the age of 50. And when you consider how much personal wealth is tied up in the business, and if you think that there's got to be upwards of 30, 40, 50% of a typical business owner's personal wealth actually tied up in that business. Now, if you've got 30 or 40% of your wealth tied up in the share market or assets or funds or whatever, you're going to manage it. You're going to look at how to do it. But these business owners aren't thinking about the value and not managing it. So 50% are over the age of 50 and they're possibly going to sell it within the next, say, 5 to years or whatever. But most people haven't got a plan. So less than 30% of business owners actually have a plan. And when you consider, there is one stat that's really scary, that only 20% of businesses that get listed on the market will actually sell. So if you're a business owner and you're thinking, you may not even be thinking, I'm going to sell it, but if you're planning to sell it, you've got to have a plan. You've got to be an attractive business, because if you're not an attractive business, if you're what we call a D-class business, you probably won't be sold. No one's going to want to buy you. You're a rubbish business. And so there's a whole lot of reasons in there, of why we should be thinking about that exit.
And look, you mentioned D-class clients, and I think most people, when they heard that, is instantly, well, my business isn't a D-class client. But I'm going to say that if you're the sole income generator and you're the sole person in your business, it is a D-class client, a D-class business, because you take you out of that business, there is nothing left. And I've had, I guess, some quite distressing conversations with business owners about to retire saying, well, how much do you think I can get from my business? And the answer I have to give them is nothing, because there is no business without you. So leaving it to that time to find out, to hear that message from me as the accountant and advisor is not really great. So you
Yeah,
can do something about it. So
yeah. And there are three probably elements there, which is good. So in terms of your preparation, what you've mentioned there is a business value about where you are now and where you could be.
mm,
And then, in your case, if you had to work with that business owner before, perhaps you could have put something in place, to help that business so they would be sellable. So that's the first side, business value, and we'll come back to that and just address, if we were going to set up an exit plan tomorrow, what could we do in that space? But there are two other sides that's really important as well that you come back to, and why it's really, really important to talk to somebody. And an accountant is a great person to speak to, because there's three elements to an exit plan. One is business value readiness. The second is personal wealth, risk, and tax. So, what's the point of selling your business for the maximum value if you're paying double the amount of tax you should? And sometimes what you can put in place 2, 3, 4 years out is going to significantly reduce how much tax you're going to pay. So proper tax planning is really, really important. And the third side is that there are something like, in a survey done by the Exit Planning Institute, there was, and they interviewed baby boomer business owners. So these are people over the age of 50, 55 that had sold their business. 75% of those business owners profoundly regretted the decision to exit 12 months after exiting. And the reason for that is purely because, you go from 1,000 miles an hour down to zero, and you're not prepared for it, or you think you've got enough money. And this is why you need to really work with your personal financial advisor to talk about, well, how much money have I got? And it really, you rebound around all those three elements. You can imagine the decision making process. I want to retire. Oh, okay. How much money do you need to retire? Well, I need to have 100K, or, a year, or 200K, whatever it is. And he said, well, okay. Well, if you've got that, how much have you got at the moment? Well, how much is that going to earn you? Or therefore, what's your business worth? Well, how much can you sell that? Or what are going to be your net proceeds? What is that added up? And so you're rebounding around. Have you got enough to achieve that? No, I haven't. Do I hold now and wait longer to sell the business? Or do I lower my expectations? Or do I better manage my tax and try and get more of net proceeds? So there's these things rebound around. Or do I keep a part of the business? I sell all of it, component of the business, and I have my IP and a little bit there, and I can make some money, so I can supplement my income and still keep me mentally happy. So there's this whole balance. But the key thing that we can't do is, when we think of an exit plan and we think of us exiting, it can't be just about maximizing value.
mm,
That's a key component, but we've got to be thinking about, all three of those dimensions wrapped up into, our exit plan.
absolutely. Look, we can get bogged down talking about the tax side of it, and I know there's some accountants in the world that would get really excited about the tax side.
I was going to say, isn't tax the most exciting subject in the world to you, Paul?
Oh, look, to me, honestly, it is about growing profitable, efficient businesses that you love to run and give you great value. But you talked about personal readiness. Now, I'm just going to park that there because I just want to find out a bit more about, what sort of things should be in an exit plan. Like, what sort of things should you be considering when you're developing an exit plan?
In the exit plan, okay. So the first thing is, we've got our business value readiness. So what sorts of things could you be thinking there? When you look at a business, you've got to think about what a potential purchaser in the future will be buying. And if you want to sell to a strategic buyer, and strategic buyers will pay more than anybody else in the marketplace for your business. So strategic buyers, like a huge competitor or a multinational, they'll only buy a business that's of a certain size. So if you're not earning $1 million a year in profit at least, or you haven't got, return of rates that are high, then, they're not going to be interested in you. So if you think you can grow to that level, then you should be thinking about who in the marketplace is going to be a potential purchaser, and you can address things in that. So when we look at the business value readiness, we look at two things. We look at, first of all, how attractive you are as a business, and then we look at how ready you are to sell. And so the sorts of things is, when you look at how attractive business is, Are you reliant on the business owner? We talked about that. Do you have recurring revenue in your business? If you've got recurring revenue, you're highly attractive. What is your profit growth over the last few years? And there's certain things we can do in that. We can make decisions 3 years out that favor us to have a growth type business. We can put a loss, perhaps in the year before. There are all sorts of things we can do just around that turn of the financial year, which is really important. Or it could be investment decisions. If we're going to sell in 5 years' time, we might put on 3 staff now. We might invest in our IP, which is another huge thing about having good IP in the business. But if we're 1 year out from selling, you don't want to put on a new staff member. You don't want to invest in new machinery because that's going to lower your profit. And I think the most important part is if anybody listening to this isn't really, that aware of what exit planning is and value, I want you to think of value very, very simply as somebody generally will come into your business, they'll have a look at what your profit is now, and there's a whole lot of definitions about what profit is, but they'll have a look at what your profit is and they will pay you one, two, three, four, or in the case of some IT businesses, upwards of 10 times your profit. Now, most businesses in Australia are sold for 1 to 2 times EBIT. EBIT is earnings before interest and tax. So it's what you get. So you want to think about what your profit is and what it can be multiplied by. Now, each industry we're in has multiple, what's called, and that multiple's been really, it's been developed over a number of years of selling businesses about the risk of the industry. Now, when you go into a printing industry or you go into a software industry or you go into an accounting industry, there's certain declared multiples, and you'll know roughly what that multiple is. And then what you've got to do is work out, well, how can you maximize the value? So to maximize the value, if the multiple range of generally businesses in your industry are sold between 2 and 4, then what you've got to do is get to a stage where somebody from your industry that wants to buy your business will think that if you line up all the businesses in your industry, you're going to be right at the top of the line. You're a highly valuable, highly attractive business. So they're going to pay the top end of 4 because you're worth it. But if you're in the lower down, you get down the scale, the less money you get because you're really not a good business. So to have a look at whether you're a good business, recurring revenue, good profit, good growth, good management structure, less reliance on the business owner, good business model, captured IP in there. And that sort of defines the basic, what's the market like? You can't be in a declining industry. Now, let's suppose somebody looks at your business plan and may say, wow, you are an attractive because you've worked for the last 3 years to build this attractive business and you've done a great job. And you got this, what looks like a highly attractive business. And then a buyer comes in and they say, where are your customer contracts? You say, I haven't got them. Or show me your employee contracts, and you haven't done your employee contracts, or there's a liability in how much you've been paying, or you might have somebody that's threatened to sue you and you are holding firm that that they won't do it or whatever, and you've got a pending possible legal thing happening, or you haven't quite got your IP signed off. So there's all sorts of things where I see one of the biggest things is your numbers, and your numbers aren't quite correct. So there's two things I see that really this unreadiness. One is your numbers aren't correct, and that is that you've got this profit, and you've got this financial tax return, and your profit doesn't match up with your management accounts. So that's a big thing. You've got to match that back. But the other one is knowing your marketing numbers and driving your business. You should be able to know when somebody wants to buy your business, they want to make sure that that business is going to be replicated. They can come in and they can go, bang, I can do this, I can do that, and do that. So when you're getting ready, you want to make sure that you know your numbers. How many inquiries you got? How many web visitors? What's your conversion rate? What's your prospect rate? How many sources? How can you prove that? So I think that's really important. So there's some of the readiness, factors and attractiveness factors that you have to consider. And then we've also got a whole array of things that we have to consider as well. You have to consider from a personal wellness and well-being how you're going to handle going from 1,000 miles an hour down to zero. And you have to think about what you're going to do. And you really should get your wife involved with that because, in my case, I'll say, well, I'm just going to relax and all the rest. And my wife goes, you've got to be kidding. You can't relax, Peter. There's no way. It's sometimes good to get somebody else involved in that as well, and then you really got to talk about how much money you need, and whether or not you've got the personal net assets in place, and you will have at the time of exit to be able to afford that lifestyle.
Hmm. So, assuming we've got our business ready for exit, it's an attractive business for somebody to buy. So that's handled the business side of it. But you mentioned this personal readiness, and that means like how ready are you to stop going at 1,000 miles an hour and stop? And what do you plan to do with that time? Now, this seems to be one of those areas that a lot of people who sell their business aren't prepared for. I've had
Mhm.
multiple conversations with people who just cannot handle not being employed or not running a business and need to start another business. So, what's your experience? Because I think you've got some very relevant experience about exiting a business.
Maybe. So if you go through, I built a company up to a multi-million dollar business, sold to a multinational and did very well out of it. And I was age 39 at the time. And I thought that perhaps I could just walk away and all the rest. And after the workout, which was a nightmare, probably every business owner's worst nightmare is to have what's called an earn-out period where a multinational is telling you, an entrepreneurial gun cowboy what to do. It's not the best time of your life. But you sort of think you can walk away from that. But there's a whole lot of things about losing your identity. Involved in that because I was a CEO of a company that built up and they had people that do stuff. And back in those days when we actually went to banks, I had to actually go to a bank now and I had to post a letter and we actually posted letters back in those days. But you have to do everything. And it was pretty hard and you've got to reinvent yourself. And to think that you can actually go from 1,000, there's very few people that I've seen that can be a successful entrepreneur and sell and just do nothing. There's very few people that I've seen that have actually successfully managed to do that. But there are some that have, and it all depends on your genetic makeup. Some of the things you can do, and I've recently done it again. So now let's fast track, and I've now built another business. I've just built it up. I've just sold it. Big private equity company just bought us out, and now I'm on a new journey. It's a new stage of my life, and I'm now at a different age, and I'm just about to turn 60. Now, your whole mental thinking completely changes, and things that were important to you at the age of 40 aren't as important to you at the age of 60. But there are other things that are fundamentally important, like looking after your children and making sure that they've got a future and all sorts of things. So in my case, having gone through the first experience and I've been fortunate enough because I've been involved in exit and succession planning, talk to literally hundreds, if not thousands of business owners over the years about this. So I'm prepared. And some of the ways that we'll prepare other business owners and some of the things that I did is that in my case, and in both cases of the exit, we shaved off part of the asset of the business, which became something for me to work on afterwards. So it's something. So in the first case, I developed a training program called Business Olympics. I owned the trademark. It really wasn't making any money, so it wasn't important to the first sale. So I kept that, and I went on a journey with that product in the early days, and that was enjoyable for me. Now our training division and the Institute of Advisors has really morphed from the sale, and we set it up as a parallel business, but it was tied to Mouse as we grew the business. So what I've done is I've now set that up as my number one hobby and mission in life is to build a global set of standards for business advisors around the world. I'm passionate about it, so it suits that passion. It hits me personally. It also hits the skill set of what I want to do, but it's enjoyable for me. So it's not like running a business, but it also is very profitable, let's say. So it sort of feeds into that lifestyle and that income generation as well. And that's part of my self worth, I suppose. Everyone's got a funny genetic makeup of what's important to you. And spending more time with the family and having them involved and traveling around the world is important to me. Some of the things we've done with other business owners, though, as well, is they might invest in a property, away from, in our case, we're in Sydney, which is a big sort of area, and they might invest in a property up the Central Coast. and with the idea that they'll develop it when they finally sell the business. So it gives them that option to do. Some people are very, very content with charity. And I know that one of the things I was exploring is about whether I become president of this club, which was, like in our case, it was a surf club. So what, do you go out and get yourself involved in a committee or an organization? I think there are a lot of business owners that have got a wealth of knowledge that can become great business advisors, and I think that's a suitable option for people. So what you've got to do is really sit down and work out the type of personality you are. And work out, and then try and come up with, you don't just say, yeah, I'll be right, or yeah, I'll find something then. I think you want to set a plan. Your plan's got to be really based on 3 months. I need a breather. I need to relax. You know, and then I'd say I think 3 to 15 months. You really need to have something that's going to engross you. Because that's where you go through the mental anxiety of I'm not there and all the rest, and it's recreating you and recalibrating your mind. And then you've got your 18 months on, which is the new norm, if you like. So there's different stages you go through as business owners. And, I dealt with a business owner that sold his business literally 8 months ago. And he was in tears, within a week of selling the business, thinking that he'd done the wrong thing by the staff and wondering why he'd done it and what he did and all the rest. And I speak to him now, and he's quite happy. One of the things I did with him, which I also did with myself, is I didn't love golf, but I joined a golf club, 24 months out, and started to become part of a community. And then it's not necessarily the sport; it's becoming part of a new community, and talking, and I think, you got males and females that obviously exit businesses. Females are wonderful in terms of the communication and the way they talk so much about things. Males are hopeless, and what we need to do is to encourage, you know our clients or business owners to really have the conversation and forcing it on them. And most business owners, and I know with the guy that was in tears, I used to do, see this guy, he's a friend up the road, and for the last 4 to 5 years, because being the guru of exit planning, of course, I'd be talking about, you got to make sure you got your exit in place. You got to make sure you think about it. I'd tell him that, business owners profoundly regret the decision to exit. And he was always saying, yes, 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 but how can I get more money? Who can I sell it to? What are my options? And Paul, he didn't think about it. He'd been given advice from me that many times, and he didn't think about it. So I think the most important part is really think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think not just think, but you've also got to have that plan, like you said, joining community groups in advance and working out what kind of person you are. So there's a couple of key things to having a successful exit. Now, the other thing I want to say there is that a lot of people tell me that they're not going to exit their business, and unfortunately, there's a statistic that everybody exits a business either voluntarily or, unfortunately, involuntarily. So you are going to exit. So it's in your best interest to think about it. So what are some of the just recapping the successful things or the key steps to having a successful exit from your business?
Well, I just said 55% of all business owners will exit the business because of death, divorce, disability, etc. So they'll be forced out of it. That's important. And on that point as well, I came across a business owner that had a hugely profitable business, $10 million turnover. He could possibly sell for 5 mil. I wanted to deal with him because at that stage I was helping business owners to sell. He said, I'm quite happy in the business. A competitor came in 3 years later and his business was almost worthless.
Mm.
We've got to be careful. We've got to think of risk and risk mitigation, think of our value portfolio. So I think that's important. So I think that the key things to remember is that if you're thinking about exit, and I'll talk about a couple of fundamental things you can do in terms of the value, because I know that everyone's just picking up on that, but I'll just highlight the business plan must incorporate 3 elements. It must incorporate a value readiness, and I'll talk about some really practical first place things. So value readiness, it must include personal wealth, risk, and tax. So just have just a chat to your accountant about what the tax rates would be. In this country, if you're over 55 and you sell your business at a certain level, you might even be paying zero tax at the moment. So there are some incredibly good reasons why you might want to look at it, whether you put it in a trust or whatever. And then the other side, of course, is what we mentioned, is the life after exit plan, or that personal wellness and well-being. Now, if we talk practically about that, so practical strategies for business value readiness, or if you're thinking, yep, Peter and Paul have got some good points here, I'm going to do some things tangibly tomorrow. Get a folder system on your computer, number one, and mark the folders: customer contracts, employee contracts, financials, IP, and go through and get every employee contract and put it in there. And every time you update it, put it in there. And every supplier contract, every customer contract. So I want you to start getting control over what you've got in the business and where the gaps are. That's number one. Number two is know your marketing numbers, and try and think about, what are the marketing numbers? What are, and you should be managing your business based on metrics. So, you might be looking at your sales and profit each month, which is great. But what you really should be looking at is how many calls your organization's done, how many website visitors, are your customers happy, how much product development you've done. So what we want to do is to develop, and if you could go out and get a friend or get an advisor or get your partner, and once a month sit down and have a review of your business, that'd be fantastic. And then, of course, the most important part is, and Paul, I know you've got a checklist, and we've developed a checklist because we developed as part of our fundamental core, methodology. I know you've got access to that checklist, but I would encourage anybody that listens to this podcast to do that assessment and look at what makes an attractive business, and score themselves out of 100, and then to set up a plan to move forward. And there's two assessments they should be doing. One is an attractiveness assessment, which is fairly short and sharp, probably take them 20 minutes to do. And the other one is a readiness one, which is a little bit more involved. But that attractiveness one, anyone listening to this should be just, let's get a hold of it. Let's do the assessment, 15 to 20 minutes, and let's have a look at where we are, where we rate ourselves. And that'll give you an idea of all the things you should focus on.
Absolutely. Look, we'll put links to those assessments in the show notes, which will be available for you to jump on and do those. So you can do them in your own time, and then the results will be sent to you. So you can have an idea of how attractive your business is at this present time. But the key to, I think, growing the value and or getting your plan in place is actually to get advice and to work with somebody qualified in this area. And Peter, that's something that you've really been trying to push the virtue of, is getting some recognition about who actually is qualified to advise. Because I think there's been this, I keep seeing these articles saying one of the 10 easiest business to set up is business coaching and advice. But I think you're coming at it from a different approach, which I really appreciate.
I think absolutely. Look, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate. Being a strategic oriented advisor, an ex-business owner that's dealt with what I think is delivering good advice in a good solid way for many, many years, and training people to a high level. And then you see all these new advisors coming in. And these new advisors are, they're not necessarily there for the well-being of a client, or they may know no better, and they're giving advice based on financial metrics. They're giving, they're not really covering all bases. This is an industry that's not regulated. There's no set of standards, and there should be. And that's why we set up the Institute of Advisors. We have a certification program for business advisors, and we require any business advisor to be certified. And to become certified, they need to go through a rigorous training course and get their certification. I know, Paul, you've been through that. You've been through that certification, and one of the things that I admire about you and your background is you've sort of almost pioneered the accounting, morphing into advisory, and you've done it very well. But a lot of the accountants out there, a lot of the financial planners, a lot of people that sort of jump into advisory are doing it just as a bow to add to something else, and they're not doing it well. An advisor needs to think holistically in the business, needs to think strategically in the business, and it needs to also hold the hand of the business owner. Being a business owner is lonely sometimes. It's hard. There's a lot of conflicting thoughts and views, and they've got no one to talk to. And so it's recognizing that when you're dealing with a business owner, but you're dealing with a person, that person has personal goals, and it's the business goals and the personal goals that are really, really important. And so I'm very passionate about maintaining and keeping a good set of standards, not only in this country, but around the world.
Yeah, and that's really important, and the quality of the advice you get, and the advice in terms of helping you to implement your strategy is key. So wherever you're listening, there are members of the Institute of Advisors worldwide. I will put a link to that website in the notes as well, so you can find out somebody in your local area that is a certified advisor that has gone through the rigorous training and qualification process, and you'll know that they are equipped to not just work with you, but they've got the skills and experience to impart, which will really help you grow your business, but also achieve a great exit. So that's what we want to achieve. Look, Peter Hickey, I could talk to you for hours and hours, because you are a wealth of knowledge and information and some great experience, and you're very generous with your time and sharing that. But I do appreciate that you've given up your time to speak with us today. If people need or want to get in contact with you, what's the best way that they should contact?
Probably through the website would be fantastic. It's the instituteadvisors.com. So it's the Institute of Advisors is the name. But yeah, look, we'd love to help anyone. I'll point you into the right direction. We've also got a wealth of resources on the website. And look, and we have advisors around the world. Obviously, Paul, none as well qualified, as good looking, and as good as what you are.
Thanks, Peter. You're very generous. I keep saying that I've got a good head for podcasts. So, but thank you again for your time, and appreciate it. And we'd love to have you back to tap into some of these other areas, particularly that you have experience with small and medium business. So, thanks again, Peter.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for listening. Do you have a question you'd like our team of experts to answer? If you do, send your question to podcast@thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. To hear more from The Business Behind Your Business, don't forget to subscribe using your favourite podcast player. Or you can visit the businessbehindyourbusiness.com website.